Hello, I'm Ramin Senanayaka, and today I'm going to discuss question set 18 of the series from question set 16 to question set 20. So today in this video we have to enter the data to the database that we have previously created, and let's get into it. So for that I'm gonna open up IDSQL. So I have IDSQL opened up here, and this is our database right here, exam marks DB, and let's go ahead and enter the data. So on the first question, we have to enter the data to the class table. There are only 2 records to the table, so I'm gonna enter both of those using queries, and I'm gonna show you how to do it. So to insert the record to the table, first you have to write a insert query starting with insert into, and then we write the location of the table, which is exam marks DB, and then comes the table name, which is class, and then we write the column names. So there are 2 columns in the class table, as you can see right here, and I'm gonna copy the name of it to the query, and then we write values to enter the data to the table. For the first value we have 1, and then we have the class name, which is 11A, and there you go. That's how you write the insert query. Let's go ahead and execute it, and there you go. We can see that the data has been entered to the table. So let's go ahead and write the second query as well, but before that I have to show that the class ID is integer and has auto increment. Therefore entering the class ID is not totally necessary, because it will be added automatically when a record is entered to the table. So let's go ahead and write the second query. All I have to do is change the values of it. So the number 1 that we have previously entered changes to number 2, and 11A changes to 11B. So let's go ahead and execute it, and let's refresh it, and there you go. We can see that the 2 records have been entered to the table. And let's get into the second question. So it states that we have to enter the data to the student table. So in the student table we have 6 columns. So I'm gonna enter the first record as an query to show an example of how to enter it as an query, but I'm gonna enter the rest of the records graphically. So let's go ahead and enter the data. Like in the previous question, it's also an insert query, so insert into, the database name is exam marks DB, the table name changes to student. As you can see right here, I'm gonna make space for 6 columns, and I'm gonna copy the name of it to the query. And then we enter the values. So first up is the index number, and then the first name, and then we got last name, and then we got gender, and then we got contact number, and lastly we got class name. But before that I have to mention, in this table it states the class name, but in our database the student table has the column class ID taken from the class table, the class ID. So here if we enter the class name as 11A, I will get an error message. So it states that the data truncated for volume class ID at row 1. So here it should be the class ID, not the class name. So it's either 1 or 2. I could just enter 1 here, then it will be done. But let's say I don't know the class ID of the class name 11A. So when that happens, all I have to do is enter an subquery. So let's go ahead and do that. So subquery basically means a query within an query. So here the class ID should be searched within the class table. Therefore we have to write a select query for that. So select from, and then we write the location of the table, which is exam marks db, which is the database, and then the class table where. So we write where to write a specific condition. So here the column class name should equal to 11A. So there you go, we have written the query. But before I execute the query, I'm gonna explain it once again. So we have to write an insert query to enter the data to the table. So we are inserting into the 6 columns of the student table, and here are the data respective to those columns. But on the last column we have class ID, not class name. Therefore we have to write either 1 or 2 for the value of it. But let's say if we don't know the class ID of that class name, we have to write an subquery for it. So subquery basically means a query within a query, and since we don't know the class ID of the class name 11A, we have to write a search query or a select query for it. So the subquery is an select query, select from, and then we have to state the table name or the location of the table, which is the class table within the exam marks db database, and then we write where to state the specific condition, which is class name being 11A. So let's go ahead and execute it. Right. So I have forgot to write what I have to select from it. So we have to write since we are selecting the class ID, we have to write class ID. So let me explain it once again. So we are selecting class ID because the class ID should come into the column class ID. So we are selecting class ID from the class table, where the class name is where the class name should be 11A. So let's go ahead and execute it again. So there you go, the query has been successfully executed, and let's go ahead and see if the data has been entered to the table. And there you go, it has been successfully entered to the table. Here the class ID is stated as 1, and let's see if that matches with the class table. So there you go, the class ID is 1, which is the class name 11A, and that's how you enter the insert query for the student table. And I'm gonna enter the rest of the data in graphical method. And there you go, we have entered the data to the student table. And let's get into the third question. So in the third question, it states that we have to enter the data to the subject table. So there are 3 rows to the table, so I'm going to enter all of those 3 rows in queries. So in subject table we have 2 columns. Like in previous questions, it should be an insert query, so insert into, this time it's the subject table. Columns are subject ID, and then we have the subject name. And then we enter the values to it. So first we have the subject ID, and then the subject name, which is for the first record is mathematics. So let's go ahead and execute it, and let's see if the data has been entered to the table. And there you go, the record has been entered to the table. And let's go ahead and insert the remaining 2 records as well. So here the ID changes to 2 and the subject name changes to science. And I'm going to copy the whole query and insert under this query, and I'm going to change the values of it. Subject ID to 3 and the subject name to Sinhala language and literature. And let's go ahead and execute the 2 queries, and let's refresh the table to see the end data entered to the table, and there it is. And that's been done. Let's go ahead and get into the 4th question. Enter the data in the table below in the exam term table. So in the first question we have to enter the data to the exam term. So here we have the term ID, term name, and the exam date. And like in the previous question, let's enter the data into the table using queries. So like in the previous question, the data should be entered in insert queries. So we have 2 rows to be entered, and I have written two queries for it. And here I have stated the table name and the columns of it in the two queries, and the values of it is on the first row we have the term ID as 1 and the term name as first term, and then we enter the exam date. So 2020, and then onto the second query, and there you go, we have entered the data to the table. Let's go ahead and execute the queries, and let's see if the data has been entered to the table. Let's refresh the table, and there you go, the two rows has been added to the exam term table. And onto the fifth question, we have to enter the data into the student exam mark record table. So on the first 3 columns we have the index number, first name and the last name, but on the last 3 columns there are the 3 subjects, and each column has 2 columns representing the first term and the second term. So in our database, student exam mark record table only has 4 columns. So how are we going to enter the first record into the table? So here we have the student index number, which is obviously the index number here, and the subject ID is taken from the subject table here, and the term ID, which is the term ID from exam term table, and then we have the mark column. So to enter this single row, we have to write 6 queries in order to enter the first record to the student exam mark record, because we have to write query for each subject and each term, because we have to write 2 queries for the two terms and 6 queries for 3 subjects. So I'm going to show how to insert the first row here using queries into the database, and let's get into it. So here the table has to be student exam mark record. So in the student exam mark record there are 4 columns, so I'm going to make space for it. And let's copy the column names from here. So there you go, we have entered the column names. The table name should be changed here as well, since we have to write 6 records to enter the first row of the student exam mark record table. I'm gonna copy these queries 4 more times, and there you go, we have 6 queries, and let's go ahead and enter the data. So first we have the subject mathematics of the student Sandun Vijayaratna. So his index number is STU001, and let's go ahead and enter the first row. So on the first row we have mathematics first, so mathematics is 1, and then the student index number, which is STU001, and then we have the term ID. So first term it's 1, and then comes the mark, which is 50. So the first query is for the first term marks of mathematics of the student Sandun Vijayaratna. And let's get into the second query. So the second query must enter the second term marks of the subject mathematics of the student Sandun Vijayaratna. So subject ID is still 1, student's index number is STU001, and here the exam term ID changes to 2 and the mark is 44.12, and that's mathematics done. And on to the next subject we have science. So subject ID changes to 2, the index number stays the same. Since it stays the same for the 6 queries, I'm gonna copy it to the rest of the queries as well. And let's get back into the third query. So next we have the exam term ID, which is first term, and the marks for the first term of the science subject of Sandun Vijayaratna is 85, and then the second term of the subject science. So subject ID is 2, and then the term of it is 2, and then the marks of it is 95, and that's science done. On to the third subject we have Sinhala language and literature. So subject ID of it would be 3, student index number stays the same, which is STU001, exam term ID is 1, which is first term, and then the marks of Sinhala language and literature in the first term, which is 78.6, and lastly we have to enter the marks of Sinhala language and literature in the second term of Sandun Vijayaratna. So subject ID is 3, student index number stays the same, and exam term changes to 2, and lastly the marks of Sinhala language and literature in second term, which is 78.5. And there you go. These are the 6 queries we have to enter in order to enter the first row of this table into the student exam mark record. And let's go ahead and execute it. And there you go, the data has been entered to the table. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for the remaining records as well. And there you go, we have entered the data to the student exam mark record, and that brings the end for answering the question set 18. And let's continue the series with answering the question set 19 in the next video. And thank you for watching.